Hi, welcome to Your Future, Your Finances. We're back, and now we're talking with Corliss Jackson, who is a federal job coach. Thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, very good. Tell us a little bit about what a federal job coach is and your background.
Okay. Well, what I do is I work with individuals and groups of folks who are interested in getting into the federal government.
Okay.
It's quite an interesting process and can be a little bit mystifying. So just to give you a little bit of background about me, I have about 20 years of federal HR experience. I started right here in Montgomery County at the Department of Health and Human Services, and then I moved on to the Office of Personnel Management and did some work with staffing and human resources there. And I left my federal job about 10 years ago. And several people approached me and said, I'd love to work for the government, but I can't figure out how to navigate through the hiring process.
Yeah.
Can you please help? So here we are about 9.5 years later, and still helping people navigate through the process.
Yeah, and it's certainly a good job if you can get it as well. What are some of the benefits of working for the government?
Yeah, lots of federal benefits. Once you get in, it's really hard to get rid of you unless you do something really egregious. The pay is very comparable to the private sector. A lot of folks don't understand that, but it really is. They do pay what you're worth most times. And that's based on the GS pay scale, so you can do some investigation on that. But GS1 is the lowest level, and GS15 is the highest level, and most folks are paid somewhere in between there. So
a very organized way of knowing.
Very systematic process, very systematic. The other thing about working for the government is that there's a lot of work-life balance. You will find that most of the agencies will expect you to work a pretty solid 40-hour work week and maybe not much more. A lot of times in the private sector, you're expected to work a lot longer. Some of the agencies will allow you to work from home. A lot of benefits of working on site. There's on-site childcare, there's gyms, there's all kinds of programs, and there's some agencies that are better than others in taking care of their employees. So a lot of different benefits.
So then getting in, so that's the key. So do you have to have a college degree?
Interestingly enough, the government, they're interested in folks with degrees, but there are many, many jobs for which a degree is not required. And, you know, the best possible scenario would be for you to have a degree and for you to have the work experience, but a very close second would be to have the work experience alone. Very interesting how the government will use your work experience to qualify you for many of its jobs.
Okay. So what are the types of things they're looking for as in a workforce?
Yeah, so the government hires all types of folks in all fields at all levels of the government. You will find that there are not only desk jobs, but there are positions in the field. There are park ranger positions. There are, secretarial, administrative assistant positions. There are all types of positions from high to low, all over the government. And generally, you will, if you can find a job in the private sector or the nonprofit sector, you will be able to find something that is very similar in the public sector.
Okay. So in the hiring world, they have a term you mentioned, KSAs. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so KSAs are what we call knowledge, skill, and ability statements. KSA statements. And these are simple phrases that the government gives us, and they are interested in having us prove that we have these particular knowledge, skills, or abilities. For example, you might see a KSA on an announcement say, ability to communicate in writing. And that means that the government wants you as the applicant to prove that you have written communication skills. Okay? In the past, the way that we as applicants addressed these KSAs was in the form of a lengthy essay, usually somewhere between 1 to 2 pages long, and there's usually somewhere between 4 and 8 KSAs for each announcement. So your application could be, 16 pages long just with the essay component.
And you have to know to write those, or does it say on the announcement to write them?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago we went through something called hiring reform, and the government said, you know what, we're not going to ask for these essays in this length any longer. We're going to do something a little bit different. So many agencies, it's about 96% of the agencies, will no longer have an essay requirement. They might ask you more questions, but there's no essay that you need to write. Generally, what they want you to do is to really incorporate these knowledges and skills and abilities into your federal resume.
And that's for people who want to work for the government, or this is something that's tracked and assessed while you're working there?
No, this is for potential employees. So if you want to become an employee of the government, you will have to, in some form or fashion, address a KSA.
And they could vary depending on the job.
They can vary depending on the job and the agency.
So how long does it take to get a federal job from beginning to end?
Great question, Brian. Great question. It can take anywhere from a couple months to maybe 18 months.
But no less than a couple months in most cases?
It's generally a fairly long process, and it really depends on a lot of different factors. One of the variables might be what type of work you're looking for, how specialized your skills are. I mean, if you have a very specialized skill set, you're probably going to get selected pretty quickly. However, that job might not become available that often. If you don't interview well, a lot of folks will go on federal interviews and not do well first, second, or third time because they're introduced to a panel and it's a very stressful situation and they just don't do well. So you got to get through that as well.
Very interesting. We'll just take a break. We'll talk more about that. We'll be right back with Corliss Jackson, federal job coach. We're talking about federal employment today. You're watching Your Future, Your Finances. We'll be right back.